Run. Hey, listen, I'm going to jump into this one. The title of this morning's scope is What the President Missed in Baltimore. I woke up thinking about this. I guess I need to find a hobby, but as many of you know, President Obama visited a mosque in Baltimore this past Wednesday and talked to Muslims in the audience about a range of different topics. And it's been in the news. It was in the news a lot yesterday. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm actually going to go against what a lot of the people in the media are saying. And I don't disagree with the president going to a mosque in the United States and talking to the congregation. I don't disagree with it at all. In fact, when I go around the country talking to law enforcement and to town halls, I tell them to do exactly the same thing. I mean, let's face it. Many of these people are Americans, and this is about community engagement. I will tell you, Green Berets and a few others learned the hard way in Afghanistan that if you try to marginalize and push out and isolate Muslims in this fight, the general ummah or the religious base, all you do is give just plenty of maneuver space for the enemy to come in and engage them. And we just can't do that. This is about the only thing I've seen work in this entire 15-year war, and it's chronicled in my book Game Changers, is working at the community level to empower practical, pragmatic leaders in those communities to stand up for themselves and push out the agitators. Now, whether that's in Iraq, whether that's in Afghanistan, or whether that is in Baltimore, that's got to happen. Now, that said, let me say that was a horrible visit. Everything else about that visit was terrible. But the idea of reaching out to communities of Muslims is not a bad idea, and we need to do more of it. It's just how it goes. That's what we need to be doing. But the way he did it was atrocious. First of all, to go to a mosque that has lingering allegations and connections to terror support, I mean, come on. What the president, it's not only what he says, it's what he does, regardless of party. And if you go and you are seen in a mosque that has terror affiliations, that is under surveillance by the FBI, you have just given a tacit green light to the Muslim Brotherhood and others who are using those kinds of religious institutions as cover. We've got to be smart. Our leaders have got to be smarter than that. And this is what I'm talking about in 2016. You as voters, I'm asking you to be more judicious and more selective about your leaders and look at their behavior. That is not a good behavior for an American leader to do that in that particular mosque. Number two, the apology and the atonement to the Muslim congregation was done on behalf or done at the expense of all other Americans, namely Christians in the United States. In other words, President Obama rendered basically an apology for how the Muslim community was treated and kind of scolded the Christian people on the stage. That is not what a leader does. A leader does not lead that way. A leader is a bridging force. He is a connector, and he challenges all sides of the aisle to come together. That did not happen. That was an atonement, that was an apology, and it was at the expense of Christians and others and basically scolding them from the stage. That actually plays right into the hands of ISIS and the narrative that they are trying to fuel of Islam against everybody else against Islam. Again, our leaders, they got to be smarter than that. We have to demand more of them than that. And then the final thing, and this is something I'd ask you to think about when you evaluate your congressmen, your presidential candidates, and even your local candidates. There was no call to action in that speech at all. It was only an apology, and it was done for political maneuvering. It was done to position himself as sympathetic to the Muslim cause and the Islamic cause at the expense of others. That is actually divisive. There was no call to action for practical, pragmatic leaders within the Muslim community to stand with other leaders, with other Americans in communities across the nation against ISIS. For all of us to stand as Americans, regardless of our faith, regardless of our ethnicity, regardless of our party, against one common enemy. And by the way, these extremists that I'm talking about, this is not subversion against Islam. These extremists kill more Muslims than any other religion. They are more oppressive and more brutal and more lethal to Muslims than anyone else. So there was no call to action looking out to the congregation and saying, listen, we need all of you parents and grandparents out there to take a stand, to root out and ferret out those that are trying to recruit and hijack our children and those that are trying to attack America. We are first and foremost Americans. I didn't hear any of that. I want to see that from our leaders. I want to see men and women of the caliber of Romy Camargo, who have given every measure of themselves to protect this country. It's time that we get politicians in office that have a fraction of that courage and aptitude. And if we don't, and if they don't, I recommend we don't pull the lever on them. Until next time, this is Scott Mann, and I'll see you on the high ground.